Welcome again to Lakeshore Focus, a weekly show highlighting the key issues, important events, and interesting people in our region. I'm Keith Kirkpatrick. With the new year comes a new set of political issues that affect our state and particularly our region. Here to chat about Indiana's upcoming legislative agenda is one of the esteemed leaders from our region, Indiana State Senator Karen Tallian from the 4th District. Don't you like that esteemed part?
I do.
Do you get called esteemed very often?
Not often.
Not often enough, maybe?
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
Now, you were telling me before the show, I thought this was kind of interesting before we get into all the politics, that you get to spend a little vacation time prior to the session in a faraway place. Maybe not so far away. Where you go?
To the Virgin Islands. It's a nice little spot to be.
So do your constituents get a hold of you while you're down there?
Occasionally. I do answer the phone.
So do you check your email too?
Yeah.
While you're gone?
Yeah, you can't be gone and not do that.
So, you know, it's interesting. Before we were talking before the show, the upcoming session. We always talk about having a part-time legislature that meets only for a few months, but you've been at it for already a month before the session even starts, right?
Well, it's a budget year this coming session, and so every 2 years in December we hold the budget committee. I'm a member of the budget committee. We hold hearings from every agency and get their proposed budgets, what they want, what they think they need for the next 2 years. And then we also get the revenue forecasts. So yeah, 3 days a week for the last 4 weeks.
And you even really meet during the off season too. I mean, really, don't you? I mean,
the budget
summer
committee
studies
also meets during every month during the off season, and then we have summer study committees, usually August, September, October.
So much for a part-time legislature, right?
That's right. They lied when they told me it's only a part-time job.
How many years have you been in your seat now?
I came in December of '05, so I started the '06 session.
Okay. So you really haven't been in as long as a few of the other ones, like Charlie Brown and a couple of them.
Oh,
right?
no, I cannot hold a candle to decades of experience, right?
But you've learned quickly about a lot of what's going on.
I hope so.
So, you know, I think everybody's really anticipating this session, particularly with the Republican having a supermajority. What do they keep meaning by having a supermajority?
Well, they did have a supermajority last time as well. A supermajority, in order to conduct business, you have to have a quorum. And, you know, if you have a very tight margin, you might, and some people don't show up, as happened in the state House of Representatives a couple years ago, then there's no quorum and they can't conduct business. A supermajority in this case means a quorum-proof majority. They have enough members to make a quorum even if none of us showed up.
So none of that, meaning us, the Democrats don't show up.
And they have that now in both the House and the Senate.
We had quite a few gains over the past few years for the Republicans in this region. I mean, this used to be kind of this Democratic stronghold with just a couple of exceptions, but we seem to now have more of a balance with more Republican seats. What's your explanation of what's happening to create that?
I have no explanation. Well, there are a couple of things. I mean, and this isn't necessarily just for Lake County because it's surely evident in Indianapolis. If you look at the demographics, for example, of Indianapolis, you know how many Democrats there are versus how many Republicans. And just based on those numbers, you would think that, you know, given just a regular cutting up of the district, you should have about half and half. Or even, actually not. You should have more Democrat senators, for example, in Indianapolis, just based on the numbers. Well, if you take all of the Democrats and you put them into 2 districts and you make them 90-some% Democrats, then all the rest of the districts become Republican. That's what's called gerrymandering, and Indianapolis right now is just a classic example of that.
Why can't we get past that? Because, I mean, I thought that was technically illegal, or
Well,
it should not.
technically, it is illegal. You know, the Democrats in Indianapolis would have had to challenge the last maps. They didn't. I don't have an explanation for that. But, you know, you certainly see, for example, in the last governor's election, you know, the Pence and Gregg numbers were only a couple of points apart. And yet you see these huge majorities by the Republicans in both chambers. That's about maps, and that's what maps can do.
First of all, I want to compliment you and thank you that when I asked you a question a moment ago, you actually looked puzzled and didn't have an answer. From somebody in political office, you don't expect that very often. It's like, I thought you're supposed to have an answer for everything, Karen.
I don't, and I also don't have an answer, and I'm going to say this, for why we only have 30% voter turnout in the state of Indiana. We're among the last in the country.
That is embarrassing.
It is, and I have no answer for that.
You know what's been interesting to me these last few years, it seems like maybe the last 8, is how often our legislature or our elected officials in this, that lead the state want to be different than the entire rest of the country. It's like Indiana's going to do it a different way, even though the other 49 states are doing it. Where does that come from? Why do we think we're right and everybody else is wrong?
You haven't heard that from me.
I said it, so that's what it sounds like.
I think that some members of the Republican Party want to keep that that sort of face out there because they don't, you know, I mean, it's the way to disagree with what's going on in Washington. It's a way to distance themselves from the federal government. We're not going to do what the Democrat federal government is saying. We're going to do it differently. Now, you may just chalk it off to independence. I chalk a lot of it off to just being obstreperous.
If we can define that. So.
Yeah, well, I mean, just be willing to let's stir the pot or let's make an issue because we can, because we don't want to be seen as doing anything that the federal Democrats are doing.
Well, it seems like that's kind of we reject even the good stuff sometimes. I mean,
like
it's
$80 million
everything.
in federal money.
I was going to bring that up.
Yeah.
So the $80 million was available for child care in this state.
Yes.
For child care programs.
Right.
And we evidently had a plan all written, ready. This is what I understand, all ready to be submitted, and the governor said, we're not going to submit that. Is that the way it played out?
That's my understanding of how it played out. And not only did we have a plan, but we had a plan that had been in the works, put together by a bipartisan group that had been working on this for a couple of years. And so I think it was just a total shock to everyone when the governor said, no, not going to take it.
And we've learned over these past few years that this early childhood education is just everything that we need to be putting resources. That's been a #1 priority for this region for the past 2 years, I believe, is saying that we need to be doing more with early childhood education. And then to turn that down seems like a really silly thing to do.
Well, and not only that, but I mean, certainly even the the Pence administration came out initially as part of its platform to expand and fund early childhood education. And then why we had this about face when the money was like there waiting for us.
Yeah. We're just going to have to
I
see how
can
that
only
plays out, I guess.
I can only guess.
Yeah. You know, everybody keeps saying this year is obviously a budget year, but the other big issue is going to be education. And I think I heard someone state recently that it's kind of like that education, this will be the time we decide if the extra money we're going to put in is going to go into education or not. I mean, how do you kind of frame that whole issue?
Well, you know, the budget and education can't be separated. We spend over 50% of our budget
It's a huge
on
portion.
K through
right.
12 education. And we did that as a state by choice. Not every state chooses to do that. But some time ago, when we did the property tax relief, we said, look, we will give local people tax relief on their property tax, and we will pay for public education solely through the state general fund, and we'll raise the sales tax a penny in order to pay for that. Now, everybody remembers that.
And the popular opinion was to support that in the state, wouldn't you say?
I didn't agree with it at the time.
But it was the popular opinion.
It was the popular opinion, but I kept saying, we're going to have a problem. We're going to have a problem with this. So there are a couple of problems. It basically means that the state can pretty well dictate how much money is going to be spent on schools and how it's going to be spent. And we can even start messing around with some of what used to be locally controlled topics, like textbooks, like, a whole number of things.
Why didn't people see that loss of local control back when that happened?
Because there were some people talking so loudly about how 1, 2, 3% tax caps was going to save everything.
And people were looking from their own personal pocketbook and saying,
Right.
that's going to save me money. I could care less about the rest, understanding the rest of it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, people send us down there to do things and don't always pay attention to all the ramifications. I mean, we don't always see all the ramifications, and we're in the middle of it. So, yeah, it's been a problem. And then that whole thing was compounded certainly by the recession that we had, because when that happened, education took a cut to its base. And if you'll let me just explain that for a minute,
I remember this.
we don't just build a budget every year starting from scratch. We look at what was spent in the last biennium, and then that's considered your base. So if your base is $1,000 and we're going to ratchet things up by 2% or 3%, you know where you're going to be. Well, when we cut the base, let's say, for example, we went from $1,000 to $700, just because we didn't have the money then. Since then, we've been building on the new base.
That's where you will hear some people say, we have continued to increase funding to education in the state because they're increasing it off that lower base.
Right. So if you add 2 or 3% to $700, you still didn't get back to the $1,000 that we were. And so we have schools, a lot of schools all over the state, who are still not back to where they were in 2009.
But then the other side of this says that we have been shoving more money into education because of all these charter schools that are coming up and getting some of this money. Is that kind of the other side of the argument?
We haven't, that's the other part of the problem. Now, charter schools still get our public schools. They are run not by the school board, but they are still public schools who get the same kind of ADM money that regular public schools get. So we've added charter schools, and then we've also added vouchers. But all of those extra new schools are being funded out of one pot of money.
So there's really not an increase, is what you're saying.
No.
Why do people seem to have such difference of opinion, strong difference of opinion about this whole education issue? It seems like people are on very opposite sides in this. It's like a major fight. Why is it such a battle?
Well, first of all, I think that there is definitely an understanding education issue. There are a lot of people, even people in the State House, who don't really know how the education funding formula works and who don't really know about how the voucher money is being taken out of the pot of school money. I truly believe that because I've talked to other legislators. If you're not on the finance committees or you're not specifically on the education committee, a lot of times you just don't know how it works.
Then how can the average citizen weigh in on this education debate if it's so complex and difficult to understand? Because it does seem to be that way. How does the average citizen express their opinion about what they want to see happen?
I think that what the average citizen, where they weigh in best is on certain kinds of policy decisions. Yes, we think that every child, public school or private school, should get a state paid for education, or no, we don't. Once that sort of policy is set, then people like me can come in and say, well, okay, we're going to pay for every child in the state of Indiana to be educated, whether he goes to public school or not.
We don't believe that now?
No, there are a lot of people who think that if you choose to go to private school, then you can pay for that. We, as part of our national heritage, we have provided free public education. That's what we do. It's one of the things that has really made our country what it is.
Do you think this will be the main battle during the legislative session, this whole focus on education?
I think it's going to be one of the hugest battles on focus on education. It's funny, every single year that I have been there, people talk about how the school funding formula needs to be fixed. And every budget year, every other year, somebody comes up with major reforms to the school funding formula. And we keep doing that. And we keep doing it. And it never seems to get done exactly right. And so we're going to do it again.
So besides the educational issue, are there any other big issues you think that are coming up this year?
Yeah, and again, I think this is a public policy issue that needs to be discussed with the public. And it's about our budget and our surplus. And the question is, at what point do we put money in the savings account, and at what point are we not funding public agencies, public services enough?
Now that's a pretty simple question that could be put in front of citizens to say, look, what's your philosophy? What should our government philosophy? Should we have this giant savings account, or should we be using some of that money to fund current needs? And it's as simple as that, isn't it?
Until you get to the details,
Okay,
it's as simple as that, yeah.
But as a starting point, it's a philosophy,
Right.
right? Kind of a political doctrine type thing. Then from there, you're able to say, okay, we're going to spend more money or less money. And then does that make it easier or harder for the legislature?
No, I think that most people will agree. It's kind of a continuum. It's not a black and white. It's kind of shades of gray, if you will.
Is this like the book?
No, it's not like the book.
Okay, all right.
But it is a continuum of priorities, and that's what doing the budget is all about. I think most people will agree that it's the job of government to keep and maintain our roads, to maintain police and fire, and
Basic services and
basic
infrastructure.
education.
Right.
So once we get past those things, what else is it our job to do? And now we have to, when you can't pay for those basic things, people are going to get mad.
Mm-hmm.
And if we stop funding police, fire, education, and roads, and put the money in the savings account,
Right.
and by that I mean the budget surplus, people are going to be unhappy about that, because you heard last year the pothole situation, and we heard the outcry from the people about we have to
We've got to fix some
maintain
of
our
these
roads.
things. Now you've got, I'm not sure it's a pet legislative piece, but this medical marijuana thing that's coming, is this coming up again?
Of course.
From
I
you?
say that, yeah.
So why is this so important to you?
This started out really as a sort of my response to what I see as an attorney, to what I see happening in some of the courts. I sat in a court in Porter County one morning and watched 1, 2, 3, or 4 young kids pleading guilty to misdemeanor charges of possession of some little amounts of marijuana.
If we
And I
change the
said,
medical marijuana, though, would that allow that to happen?
well, all right. Well, that's how I got started with this.
Okay.
Is that I thought we really needed to change our policy. We needed to decriminalize this. We needed to not have kids either going to jail or having criminal records because of this.
But you told me before the show this was because you knew so much about it. I was trying to what is it, understand what that means. So you know a lot about marijuana. Is that what you're trying to tell me?
I've learned a lot.
Okay, that's what it
Yeah,
is.
I've learned a lot.
Are there a few other legislators you think that understand quite a bit about marijuana?
Probably. I'm not speaking for them.
You're not going to name them though, right?
No, that's right.
Okay.
That's right.
We're down to the last few seconds here, so last minute. What do you one thing you hope happens in this legislative session?
Oh, wow.
It'd be great if we ended with.
It would be great if we ended with a budget that addressed everyone's needs while still keeping our, a decent surplus.
And that would be a good thing,
That
right?
would be a good thing. And that's the one thing that we're charged with doing.
We'll try to get a couple of your colleagues back here in the middle of the session and then maybe somebody at the end of the session, so because a lot's probably going to happen, and I appreciate you taking the time to come here today and kind of give us a little bit of a preview. So thanks, Karen.
Absolutely. Thanks
right.
for having me.
You bet. There is one issue that I bring up regularly, and I'm going to do it again today. Government should not be run by popular opinion. We elect leaders who are charged to make good decisions on our behalf. That is what my dad taught me, was embedded in my college political science curriculum, and has become my firm belief. If public opinion dictated our actions, we would still be a colony of England. Slavery would still be operating in this country, and Germany would have won World War II. Everyone should let their elected officials know their thoughts. The line becomes blurred for so many when they think that personal opinion, perceptions, and beliefs trump factual information, thoughtful analysis, and substantive discourse. Shame on any person who serves in office and uses the opinions of a few as the sole or primary basis for a decision. It takes courage, conviction, and wisdom to sort through all sides of an issue and reach a conclusion that is best for our communities, state, and nation. I strongly challenge our citizens to stop demanding that our elected leaders follow the popular opinion of the masses. It does not help our political process. In fact, I believe it impedes sound decisions. I applaud all of those who will look beyond the selfish interest and emotional ultimatums of citizens and make a decision that is best for all of us now and into the future. Thanks for watching our show. Did you gain some greater insight? Are you more aware of what is ahead in our upcoming Indiana legislative session? We always welcome your reactions and thoughts. You can send them to our email address, which is listed on your screen. Our website is also full of exciting features. Specifically, you can watch past Lakeshore Focus episodes. Just go to www.lakeshorepublicmedia.org. Click on TV, scroll down till you see my picture. One more click and you can view a list of the past 70+ shows. Tell your friends and family about this show and how you watch Lakeshore Public Television. Make sure you join us next week for another Lakeshore Focus. Until then, I'm Keith Kirkpatrick saying, make a positive difference in our world today.